Mail-in ballots are corrupt. Mail-in ballots, you can never have a real democracy with mail-in ballots. And we, as a Republican Party, are going to do everything possible that we get rid of mail-in ballots. We're going to start with an executive order that's being written right now by the best lawyers in the country to end mail-in ballots.
So the president has claimed that mail-in ballots, mail-in voting benefits Democrats, but historically both parties have used it. Lots of people use mail-in voting. So the real question is it at risk? Can he do this? Not should he, can he? Here is a great person to talk about it. CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson, a professor at Loyola Law School. Professor, thank you very much for being here. Putting aside the should, let's talk about the can. What powers does the president have to alter the way Americans vote?
Virtually none. So the Constitution is all about power sharing. We didn't want to put the power to do anything in the hands of one group. Maybe it's the president, maybe it's Congress, maybe it's the states. So let's start with the Constitution. The Constitution says states have the power to set the time, place, and manner of elections.
All right, so here's what nobody's telling you. While you were busy scrolling through your feed, distracted by whatever drama's trending this week, something absolutely massive just dropped. And I'm not talking about some celebrity gossip or another political hot take. I'm talking about leaked emails, real emails, from inside Trump's inner circle. And what they reveal? It's honestly kind of terrifying. So here's the deal. Iranian hackers, yeah, the same group that's been causing chaos for years. They just dumped over 100 gigabytes of stolen Trump correspondence. 100 gigabytes. That's not a typo. And buried inside all that data? Plans, strategies, conversations about how to basically take over state election systems before 2026. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, oh great, another conspiracy theory, hold up. This isn't some random blog post or anonymous tweet. Reuters confirmed it. The New York Times is covering it. These are legit news organizations reporting on actual emails that are being shopped around to media outlets right now. Like, this is happening as we speak. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
The president has a lot of influence in Congress, as we have seen time and time again. What is stopping him from creating a campaign to push Congress to make a change?
Great question. Nothing at all. He can absolutely exert a lot of pressure. He can say, we should do this. This is a problem. He can exert the same level of pressure on states as well, as long as it doesn't cross the line to essentially invading state sovereignty. But the beginning of the president's message where he says, I want to start a movement, go ahead and start the movement. That's legal.
The emails allegedly showed Trump's senior advisors discussing how to replace state election officials with what they're calling loyal overseers. Loyal overseers. Let that sink in for a second. Not qualified administrators, not experienced election experts. Loyal, people who will do what they're told. Can you believe this? The documents also talk about pressuring local authorities to enforce stricter voter ID rules. Now, on the surface, that might not sound crazy to some people. You might think, well, voter ID laws are just about security, right? But here's what they're not telling you. These aren't just standard security measures. According to these emails, this is part of a coordinated effort to control who gets to vote and who doesn't. And more importantly, who gets to count those votes. This is wild. So let's back up for a second. Remember 2024? Remember when these same Iranian hackers leaked Trump aide correspondence and everyone kind of just moved on? Well, they're back. And this time, the information is way more damaging because it's not just about campaign drama or internal feuding. It's about the actual mechanics of our elections, the infrastructure, the people who run the polling stations and certify the results. And look, I know what some of you are thinking. Come on, this sounds too crazy to be real. But here's the thing. Multiple sources are confirming parts of this story. A new Reuters Ipsos poll from literally yesterday shows that 56% of Americans, that's more than half the country, believe Trump is using federal power to target political enemies. And get this, 31% of Republicans agree. His own party, nearly a third of them think he's abusing his power. That's not a fringe opinion anymore. That's mainstream concern. The New York Times reported 2 days ago that Trump has been systematically installing election deniers into key government roles. Not just any roles, key roles, the kind that matter when it comes to counting votes and certifying elections. And he's been dismantling bipartisan voting oversight systems that have been in place for decades, systems that both parties used to agree were necessary. Yeah, right. Like that's just a coincidence. And here's where it gets even weirder. The Atlantic and the Times both published pieces about Trump's recent use of AI-generated political propaganda, deepfakes, manipulated videos, digital disinformation campaigns. So now you've got leaked emails showing plans to control election officials, plus AI propaganda shaping public opinion, plus systematic dismantling of oversight. Connect the dots. This isn't just about winning an election. This is about controlling the entire narrative around elections. So why does this matter right now? Why should you care about emails that might seem like just more political noise? Because the 2026 midterms are right around the corner. Campaign season is already ramping up. Candidates are announcing. Money's being raised. And if these emails are authentic, and multiple news organizations seem to think they are, then we're looking at a coordinated effort to rig the system before voters even show up to the polls. This isn't about Democrat versus Republican anymore. This is about whether your vote actually counts, whether the people counting those votes are doing their jobs honestly, or whether they're just following orders from above. And honestly, the fact that this story isn't dominating every news cycle right now, that's the most shocking part. Where's the outrage? Where's the investigation? Where are the congressional hearings? We're about to break down exactly what's in these emails, who's involved, and what it means for every single person watching this video. Because yeah, this affects you. Whether you voted for Trump or not, whether you care about politics or not, stay with me. This gets way deeper. Okay, so let's get into the actual details here. Because once you understand what's really going on, you'll see why this is such a big deal. First, we need to talk about how these emails even got leaked in the first place. So Iranian hackers, the same group that's been linked to previous attacks on Trump's infrastructure. Now, some people hear Iranian hackers and immediately think this is some foreign interference conspiracy. But hold on, the origin of the leak doesn't change what's actually written in the emails. These are real communications from real people inside Trump's operation. Reuters reported that over 100 gigabytes of internal correspondence was stolen and then quietly shopped to multiple media outlets. Quietly, not some massive public dump like WikiLeaks style. This was strategic. Hackers reaching out to journalists, giving them access, letting them verify the contents before going public. That's actually weirdly responsible for hackers, if you think about it. And then, like clockwork, the confirmation started rolling in. Multiple news organizations started publishing stories based on what they found in those emails, which means they verified this stuff. They didn't just take the hacker's word for it. So what exactly are these emails saying? According to Reuters reporting, the messages outline what they're calling state-level influence operations tied to 2026 election readiness. That's a fancy way of saying they're planning how to take control at the local level, not federal, not some big dramatic power grab in Washington. No, they're going after secretaries of state, county election boards, local administrators, the people nobody really pays attention to until something goes wrong. And here's why that's so smart and so dangerous. Most Americans have no idea who their local election officials are. Quick, can you name your county's election supervisor? Probably not. Most people can't. And that's exactly why targeting these positions is so effective. Nobody's watching. Nobody cares. Until it's too late. The emails allegedly discuss replacing certain administrators with loyal overseers. Now let's talk about what that actually means. In a normal world, election officials are supposed to be nonpartisan. Their job is to run fair elections, period. They're not supposed to care who wins. They just make sure the process works. But if you replace those people with loyalists, people who owe their jobs to Trump, then suddenly you've got a whole different situation. Come on. You see where this is going, right? These loyal overseers would theoretically have the power to challenge ballots, disqualify voters, slow down counting in certain districts, or even refuse to certify results they don't like. And before you say, that's illegal, they can't do that. Remember this, a lot of what's legal or illegal depends on who's enforcing the law. If the people in charge of oversight are also the people benefiting from the scheme, well, good luck getting accountability. The emails also talk about pressuring local authorities to enforce stricter voter ID requirements. Now, on paper, voter ID laws are about preventing fraud. That's the official line. But here's what the data actually shows. Study after study has found that voter fraud is incredibly rare. We're talking a handful of cases out of millions of votes cast. It's statistically negligible. So if fraud isn't actually a problem, why push so hard for stricter ID laws? Because it's not about fraud. It's about suppression, making it harder for certain groups to vote, poor people who don't have driver's licenses, elderly folks who don't have updated IDs, college students who moved recently, minority communities that face more bureaucratic hurdles. These laws disproportionately affect people who tend to vote Democratic. This is wild. And it's not just speculation. The New York Times reported that Trump has been systematically installing election deniers into key government roles. People who still claim the 2020 election was stolen. People who've built their entire political identity around questioning election results. And now they're in positions of actual power, making actual decisions about how elections get run. Let me give you some context. After 2020, there were dozens of lawsuits challenging the election results. Trump's legal team filed case after case, and they lost, almost every single time. Courts at every level, including judges Trump himself appointed, looked at the evidence and said, nope, there's nothing here. Even Trump's own attorney general said there was no widespread fraud. But here's the thing. Losing in court doesn't matter if you can change the rules before the next election. And that's exactly what these emails suggest is happening. If you can't win fair and square, you change who's running the game. Are you kidding me? Now, let's talk about public opinion for a second. Because this isn't just political insiders freaking out. Regular people are noticing. That Reuters Ipsos poll I mentioned earlier, 56% of Americans believe Trump is using federal power to target enemies. That's a majority, and 31% of Republicans agree. Think about that. Nearly 1 in 3 Republican voters think their own guy is abusing power. That's not a good sign. That's not normal political polarization. That's a crisis of legitimacy. And then there's the AI angle. Multiple outlets have reported on Trump's use of artificial intelligence to create propaganda, deepfakes, manipulated audio and video, fake news articles that look real. This technology is getting so good that even experts have trouble telling what's real and what's not. So imagine this scenario. You've got election officials who are loyal to Trump. You've got voter ID laws that make it harder for certain groups to vote. And you've got AI-generated content flooding social media with false narratives about election fraud, stolen ballots, and rigged systems. All of that working together. That's not just one threat. That's a perfect storm. The Atlantic described Trump's approach as a war on reality. And honestly, that's pretty accurate. When you can't trust what you see, when you can't trust who's counting the votes, when you can't trust that the officials in charge are acting in good faith, what do you have left? Chaos, confusion. And in that confusion, whoever has the most power can shape whatever narrative they want. Can you believe this? Here's another piece of the puzzle. Trump has also been pushing to end mail-in voting. He's been vocal about this, calling it fraudulent, saying it's too easy to cheat. But again, where's the evidence? Mail-in voting has been used successfully for years. Military members vote by mail. Elderly and disabled voters use it. It's been studied extensively, and the fraud rate? Almost zero. So why ban it? Because mail-in voting makes it easier for people to vote. And if your goal is to control who votes, you want fewer people participating, not more. You want voting to be inconvenient. You want long lines. You want confusion. Because in that chaos, you can challenge results. You can claim irregularities. You can sow doubt. And doubt is the entire game plan here. You don't have to actually steal an election if you can convince half the country that it was stolen. Then you've got cover to take drastic measures. Emergency powers, federal intervention, overturning results, all justified by the narrative that the system is corrupt and needs to be fixed. This is honestly kind of terrifying when you lay it all out like this. Now, let's talk about the historical context for a minute, because this isn't happening in a vacuum. Trump has a track record. Remember Cambridge Analytica? That whole scandal about harvesting Facebook data to target voters with personalized political ads? That was back in 2016, and it worked. They identified swing voters, figured out their psychological profiles, and bombarded them with tailored messaging. That was nearly 10 years ago. The technology has advanced exponentially since then. AI tools can now create entire personas, fake social media accounts that seem real, bots that engage in conversations and spread talking points, algorithms that identify vulnerable voters and target them with precision. So when we talk about these leaked emails discussing state-level control, we're not talking about some crude, obvious takeover. We're talking about sophisticated, data-driven manipulation that most people won't even notice is happening. And here's what makes it even scarier. The systems that used to provide checks and balances, they're being dismantled. The partisan election oversight boards being replaced with partisan appointees, independent election monitors being pushed out, transparency measures being rolled back under the guise of security concerns. Come on. Does any of this sound like the actions of someone who's confident they can win fairly? So where does this leave us? We've got leaked emails showing coordination. We've got systematic placement of loyalists in key positions. We've got AI propaganda campaigns. We've got efforts to restrict voting access. And we've got a public that's already deeply divided and skeptical. The 2026 midterms are going to be a test, not just of which party wins seats, but of whether the American electoral system can survive this level of manipulation and interference. And based on what these emails reveal, yeah, we should all be paying attention, because once you lose faith in the electoral process, once people stop believing their votes matter, that's when democracy dies. Not with some dramatic coup, but with apathy, with resignation, with people just accepting that the game is rigged and there's nothing they can do about it. All right, let's break this down into simple, clear points, because I know this is a lot, and it's easy to get lost in all the details and lose sight of what actually matters. So here are the core takeaways. Point 1. The plan is local, not federal. This is crucial. When people think about election interference, they imagine some big dramatic federal takeover, military seizing ballot boxes, that kind of thing. But that's not how this works. The real power is at the local level. County clerks, election supervisors, state secretaries of state. These are the people who actually run elections. They register voters. They count ballots. They certify results. And according to these leaked emails, that's exactly where the focus is. Replace these local officials with loyalists, people who will do what they're told, people who will look the other way when something questionable happens, people who will challenge results in districts that vote the wrong way. Come on, this is literally the playbook for how you undermine democracy from the inside. And the genius of it? Nobody's paying attention. National media covers presidential races and Senate campaigns, but your county election board meeting, nobody's there, nobody's watching, which makes it the perfect place to execute this kind of strategy without scrutiny. Think about it this way. If you wanted to rob a bank, you wouldn't walk into the main vault in broad daylight. You find the side entrance nobody's guarding. That's what's happening here. The side entrance is local election infrastructure, and nobody's guarding it. Point 2. Voter ID laws aren't about security. Look, I get it. On the surface, requiring ID to vote sounds reasonable. You need ID for all sorts of things, right? But here's the reality. Voter fraud is not a significant problem. Study after study confirms this. The Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank, tracks every single case of voter fraud they can find. And even they can only document a tiny handful of cases out of hundreds of millions of votes cast. So, if fraud isn't the problem, what's the real goal? Suppression, making it harder for people to vote, and not just any people, specific groups, young people, poor people, minority communities, people who statistically tend to vote Democratic. These laws create barriers. You need a driver's license? Well, not everyone drives. You need a birth certificate to get an ID? That costs money and time. You moved recently? Now your address doesn't match. Oh, your polling place got moved to the other side of town? Good luck getting there without a car. Yeah, right. Like all of that is just coincidence. The emails allegedly discuss pushing these stricter ID requirements as part of the overall strategy. Not because they'll make elections more secure, but because they'll make elections more favorable. There's a difference. And here's the thing that really gets me. The people pushing these laws always frame it as common sense. You need ID to buy beer. Why not to vote? But voting is a constitutional right. Buying beer isn't. We don't put barriers on constitutional rights. Or at least, we're not supposed to. Point 3. AI and propaganda change everything. This is the new frontier. Deepfakes, AI-generated articles, fake audio recordings, manipulated videos. All of it so convincing that even experts struggle to identify what's real. The Atlantic and New York Times both reported on Trump's use of this technology, and think about how powerful that is. You can create a fake video of an election official admitting to fraud. You can generate fake news articles about ballot stuffing. You can flood social media with content that looks legitimate but is completely fabricated. And here's the scary part. Once that content is out there, it spreads. People share it, they believe it. And even when it gets debunked, the damage is done. Because half the people who saw the original fake never see the correction. So you layer that propaganda on top of loyal election officials and voter suppression tactics, and you've got a system where truth doesn't really matter anymore. Whoever controls the narrative controls the outcome. This is wild. I mean, think about how information spreads now. Someone posts a video on social media, it gets 1 million views in an hour. Algorithms push it to more people because it's getting engagement. By the time fact checkers catch up and say, hey, this is fake, it's already been seen by tens of millions of people. And the correction, maybe a few thousand people see that. The math doesn't work in favor of truth. It works in favor of whatever goes viral first. Point 4. Public trust is already broken. That Reuters poll showing 56% of Americans think Trump is targeting enemies, that's devastating. Because democracy only works if people trust the system, if they believe their vote counts, if they think the process is fair. But when a majority of the country thinks the president is abusing power, that trust is gone, and you can't easily rebuild it, especially when there's coordinated efforts to further erode confidence in elections. And honestly, that might be the entire point. If people don't trust elections, they don't participate, or they accept whatever outcome is declared because, hey, the whole thing is corrupt anyway, right? That apathy is exactly what authoritarian movements need to thrive. Are you kidding me? Here's what really worries me about this. Once trust is gone, it's almost impossible to get back. Even if the next election is run perfectly, by the book, completely fair, no issues whatsoever, half the country won't believe it. They'll assume something shady happened behind the scenes. They'll point to irregularities that don't actually exist. They'll demand recounts and investigations and refuse to accept the results. And that creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. If nobody trusts the system stops functioning properly because it depends on people believing in it. Point 5. This affects real policy and real lives. Okay? I know some of you watching this might think this is all political drama. It doesn't affect my day-to-day life. But here's the thing. It absolutely does. Because the people who get elected, they make decisions about your taxes, your healthcare, your kids' schools, your job opportunities. If those people are getting into office through a rigged system, you're not getting representation. You're getting whatever outcome was predetermined by the people running the scheme. And it doesn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, or completely apolitical. When the system is broken, everybody loses. Because once you normalize this kind of behavior, once you accept that elections can be manipulated at will, there's no going back. Every future election becomes suspect. Every result gets challenged. And eventually, you don't have democracy anymore. You have theater. Think about the policies that get made. Healthcare, education, infrastructure, environmental regulations, tax codes. All of that flows from who gets elected. And if the election process is compromised, then everything downstream from that is compromised too. Can you believe this is where we are? What comes next? So what actually happens now? That's the big question. These emails are out there. Multiple news organizations have reported on them. But will there be consequences? Will there be investigations? Will anyone actually be held accountable? History suggests probably not. We've seen scandal after scandal over the past few years, each one supposedly bombshell, each one supposedly the thing that finally crosses the line. And yet, here we are. But the 2026 midterms are coming, candidates are announcing, money is being raised, and all of this, the leaked emails, the loyal overseers, the voter ID push, the AI propaganda, it's all ramping up toward that election. So we're about to find out in real time whether this strategy works. And honestly, that's terrifying. Because if it does work, if they pull this off, then every election after this becomes a question mark. Can we trust the results? Were the officials honest? Was the count accurate? And once you lose that certainty, you lose the foundation of the entire democratic system. This is honestly kind of insane when you step back and look at the big picture. Here's what I think will happen. The mainstream media will cover this story for a few days. There will be some outrage on social media. Maybe a few congressional Democrats will call for investigations. But then something else will happen. Another scandal, another controversy, and this will get buried under the next news cycle. That's how it always works. Outrage fatigue. People get tired of being angry. They get tired of feeling powerless, so they tune out. And that's exactly what allows this stuff to continue. What you can actually do. Look, I don't want to end this on a completely depressing note. So let's talk about what regular people can actually do. Because you're not powerless here. First, pay attention to your local elections. I'm serious. Find out who's running for county clerk, for election supervisor, for secretary of state. These positions matter, maybe more than Senate races or even presidential elections, because these are the people who will be counting your votes in 2026. Second, demand transparency. Show up to county election board meetings, ask questions, request records, make it clear that people are watching, because the whole strategy here depends on nobody paying attention. So pay attention. Third, support voting rights organizations. There are groups fighting this stuff in court. They're monitoring election law changes. They're challenging voter suppression tactics. They need funding and volunteers. And fourth, talk to people. I know that's hard in this political climate, but if your uncle or your coworker or your neighbor is buying into the narrative that elections are all rigged, have a conversation, not an argument, a conversation. Show them the data, explain how the system actually works. Combat disinformation with information. Come on. We can't just give up and let this happen. The bottom line, look, I don't know how this ends. Maybe there will be investigations, and accountability, maybe the system will hold. Or maybe we're watching the slow collapse of American democracy in real time and nobody's doing anything to stop it. But here's what I do know. These emails are real. The strategy is documented, the pieces are in place, and the 2026 election is going to be the testing ground. So pay attention, watch your local election officials, ask questions, demand transparency, because if we don't, if we just scroll past this and move on to the next distraction, then we deserve whatever happens next. And trust me, you don't want to find out what that looks like. This isn't about being paranoid, it's about being realistic. When someone shows you who they are, when they lay out their entire playbook and leaked emails, believe them, take them seriously, and do something about it before it's too late. All right, that's it for now. More coming soon, because this story is far from over, not even close.